Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to today's session. My name's Mandy Charman. I'm the Project Manager for OPEN, the Outcomes Practice and Evidence Network within the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Services. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we are each on today, and elders past, present and future, along with any Aboriginal people in the audience. I sort of think it'll probably, because of the technology, we'll just go through a few little things first before we actually formally start. This is our first online session, so it'll be interesting to see how we go. And frankly, this is the aspect of it that I'm most sort of nervous about. So we'll just see how we go. If everyone could please mute themselves. The mute button is in your extreme left-hand corner. Can you ensure your Zoom name is your own? Sometimes we borrow different accounts and it will really help. We're hoping for this to be a really interactive session. So we're really hoping that you'll participate, your own comments, your own experiences and any questions to our very lovely panellists as well. If you will be keeping our cameras on, but it's totally up to you whether you want to or not. The session is being recorded. So so be aware of that as well. If you want to participate but don't necessarily want to speak, we're hoping you'll put questions and comments into the chat section. We'll be using that also to put any links to information that we reference. I'll just have to double check. If you have any technical issues, because sometimes we do, Ella Perry here, if you wanted to private message her, she'll probably be able to sort you out. She's a bit of a legend with these types of things. Is there anything else I've omitted, Ella, there? No, nothing else occurs?
Did you want people to add their organisation name to their Zoom name?
Yes, that would be really helpful if you can. You go into chat and next to your little chat box on the 3 little dots, there's an opportunity to change your name. If you're willing to do that, that would be fabulous because that will also help. Okay, now on to the session. This has been really, really interesting time. Today's session on promising practices within the COVID environment highlights the opportunities that come with these challenges and the learning and innovation that comes with change. We all have struggled, of course. It's sort of not been something we've chosen to do, but we're finding that it's opening up a whole new different way of thinking, different ideas that actually will create openings and opportunities going forward in a whole heap of unexpected ways. Today's open forum was driven by our unprecedented times. You know, I've heard people talk about we've all of a sudden landed in the Truman Show. Or, oh my God, I actually really like disaster movies. And this is a bit like, you know, a zombie film without some of the horrible blood and guts incorporated. We also wanted to have an opportunity to hear from the sector and the wonderful innovation and leadership that the sector has shown in responding to this struggle and in continuing to produce really great outcomes for children and families in need. So this is what today is for. This is part of OPEN's purpose to support the use, sharing and creation of evidence, because as you progress, you are producing your own evidence, you're producing your own practitioner and organisational wisdom, and that's where the most gains can be had. This is part of OPEN's mission. OPEN stands for Outcomes Practice and Evidence Network. We run events with sector and external experts. I'm really hoping to draw much more fully on sector expertise going forward. We have an open online portal for all your evidence use and creation needs. And we also provide advisory services and training to help you with any aspect of your outcomes journey. Ella has put some flyer about OPEN into the chat section of your screen, so you'll be able to access that. Anything in the chat section, you can actually save the chat at the end of the session as well, so you don't need to lose it. Okay, let's get this conversation started. We've got 3 great guests today who have offered so generously to share their organisation's journey with moving towards a remote delivery model. I'll introduce all of them and then we're going to progressively listen to their experiences, their learnings, their challenges and their tips. And then at the end, we will take questions and comments and hopefully have a bit of a conversation about what's worked for you as well. If you can put comments or questions in the chat as we progress, as they occur to you, I'll sort of moderate them and put them to any respective speaker, and also provide you an opportunity to unmute yourself and speak to that question further if you want. Okay, we're going to start with Tom Mulvaney, who's the General Manager, Impact and Strategy at Family Life in Sandringham, because I've been down there to visit you. Tom is the General Manager, Impact and Strategy at Family Life, providing oversight to innovation, research and evaluation, practice development, quality, compliance and risk management. Tom's previously managed family violence services, family services and children's services. He is a psychologist with a practice background and has also held positions in the Australian Association of Bush Adventure Therapy, which sounds fascinating, and is a member of the Australian Psychological Society. Tom, welcome. Our second speaker is Toni Gauntlett, Manager of Family and Community Services at BCYF. Toni has been with BCYF for 3 years and manages a team of practitioners that deliver innovations from early help to targeted care pathways and everything in between. BCYF is an independent not-for-profit community organisation bringing more than 40 specialist and targeted programs to achieve better outcomes for communities across the Barwon area. Prior to working with BCYF, Toni has worked in both government and the Disability and Child Family Services for 13 years since arriving from England. And lastly, Louise Rehe, Senior Manager of the Child and Family Services, Access Health and Community. Louise has worked in public health for 34 years, supporting vulnerable children and families in the community. She's a Senior Manager leading a large multi and transdisciplinary team of paediatric allied health staff. Welcome, Louise. Okay, if I hand over now to Tom, and we'll work through from there. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mandy, and g'day everyone. I'd just like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land we meet. From where I am, it's the Bunurong people of the larger Kulin Nation. Thank you to any Aboriginal people and more broadly for their custodianship of our land. It's been a really interesting journey over the past 3 months. I'm sure you will all agree as we adapt to the context of COVID-19, but maintain, I guess, an efficacy in how we go about service delivery. So Family Life, like all our organisations, has been on that journey, which at times has been a rocky road and other times provided amazing learning opportunities and an insight into what future service models may look like. So today I'm going to briefly share what Family Life's journey has been, some of the challenges we've encountered, and some of the things that have worked really well. I'm going to hold on talking about any tips that we might have for our colleagues across the sector and hope that that comes up in the Q&A section. So Family Life is a medium-sized community services organisation primarily located in the southeast suburbs of Melbourne. We provide a range of family services, including outreach services under the Integrated Family Services and Cradle to Kinder platforms. We also provide family violence services, including men's behaviour change and therapeutic trauma repair programs. We run a range of federal services under our Family Relationship Centre, and also a range of community capacity building services with a view that we can't work individually with children or families without supporting the systems that exist around them. Finally, we run some services in prisons to support family connection and engagement, and that office is based out of Sunshine. So we work more broadly with people from across the state through that program, which is called Unite. Family Life's been running for about 50 years and was set up by volunteers for the community and still retains 5 opportunity shops, which have been, I guess, one of the challenges to sustain through the COVID environment. We have over 400 volunteers that support our operations and about 160 staff, one of whom, Anne, joins us today. Lovely to see you in the group, Anne. So we were fairly lucky at Family Life in that we had invested in some technology transformation over the 2 years preceding COVID landing. That meant that all our staff had laptops and all our services staff had access to a smartphone. We had in place already some working from home policies and procedures. And we had a workforce that were fairly adept at managing working remotely at mobile workforce. So we don't have a formal hot desking arrangement, but equally we don't have substantive kind of desk allocations across the organisation, and we really encourage kind of that flexibility of practice. So that enabled us to go offline into remote service delivery fairly quickly at Family Life. We activated that in mid-March, so quite early in the piece, to make sure that our workforce felt safe and comfortable continuing to practice through the COVID context. But as you all experienced, we had to adapt our service models fairly rapidly to be able to work remotely. So our initial focus was on supporting our 160 odd staff to shift to working from home and to review what our practice models needed to look like in that space. The key challenge or early stumbling block for us was determination of which platform we ought to use for continued connection with our clients. And to be honest, that I think has remained the biggest challenge in remote service delivery for us. And I'm sure we found that you needed a fairly high degree of technical expertise to distinguish between the different available platforms. And to a layperson, they kind of all look the same. So we did have to engage in consultation with a range of partners from the tertiary university sector, as well as kind of technical experts through our IT service provider and organisations like Deloitte to really land on what platforms would be best to go with. So the first couple of weeks we were using mobile phone contact with our clients to sustain service, but we wanted to shift to an option to have face-to-face visibility with clients as soon as possible. So over that 2 weeks, we conducted an audit into the available platforms for service delivery. And that audit existed across 3 clear phases. So phase 1 just looked at our basic needs for a service platform. We were keen to look at something that would be easy to adopt across the organisation, but that ensured secure access and encryption of data, that provided a platform that was resistant to malware, had easy sign-up, use and collaboration facilities, provided connectivity to a range of devices, knowing that while our workforce all had the same technology, our clients would have different systems and devices. We wanted to scope a platform that would provide for individual one-on-one sessions with children and families, but also ideally a platform that enabled group service delivery. Finally, we wanted to look at a platform that would enable webinars and recording facilities for webinars so that we could continue with our community capacity building work alongside our individual family and group work. So we reviewed a range of platforms and chose 2 that we were keen to pursue through further audit, which moved us into phase 2 of our audit, where we wanted to review the 2 platforms we'd selected against the ethical standards for human services. I won't go into all the principles that we applied to that second round of audit, but those principles for Family Life were informed by the Australian Psych Society, who've released principles for choosing video conferencing technology, and the cybersecurity checklist, which was released by the federal government. So we used both those papers to inform the determination of our principles, which we applied to those 2 platforms we selected. Needless to say, the platforms didn't meet all our principles, and I think this is a real challenge for us going forward, that we have to land in a space that's good enough, it meets our principles and provides for strong enough security and privacy of data for our clients, but it's not ideal still, it's not exactly what we'd want it to look like. So not being able to go into baseline platform design that's bespoke to the services that we're delivering, I guess means that we have to rely on what's available on the market what's affordable for organisations like ours to use, and what's going to be accessible for clients. The key thing we wanted to understand was how safe client data was going to be in using any of these platforms. And there's pros and cons across multiple platforms there without any really clear standouts. But we still landed on 2 platforms. So we decided to use CoviU for our individual work with clients. That enables the package we purchased for all our services staff, enables up to 4 different devices to access a session. So you can run small groups and you can run family sessions. And CoviU's levels of encryption and data security were the strongest we could find across all the available platforms. And it's a great platform in that it was designed in Australia in partnership with CSIRO. So best met all the privacy standards that we applied to our tool selection. Zoom was the other tool that we landed on to ensure we had business continuity through our internal meetings. Family Life had previously used Google Suite for all its services and still do, but found that Google Meets didn't meet our needs, primarily just around functionality of that platform. Although over time, Google Meetings has shifted to Google Teams and now has amongst all the majorly used platforms the strongest security. So I think that's presented an inherent challenge. We, through our 2 phases of audit, made our selection, but all these tools have adapted so rapidly over the last 2.5 months to the performance of their competitors that this is almost a live feast, choosing which tools that you want to stick with in the longer term. We've also used Zoom for some group services. So phase 3 of our audit reviewed our platform Zoom against other available platforms for groups. DHHS and the department have used Microsoft Teams and WebEx most commonly. So we wanted to review the security of Zoom against those 2 other platforms. And ultimately we decided to retain Zoom for group service delivery and for our internal meetings, because although it didn't necessarily have the same level of data security that WebEx and Microsoft Teams had, it's not clearly distinguishably worse than either, and certainly is an easier platform to use with better functionality for groups. For us there, the key consideration was the administrative settings, and with Zoom, we found that we could put in place many administrative settings that enhance the safety of our staff participating in that stuff, but also their ability to facilitate sessions. That's a decision that we're constantly reviewing, and depending on the longevity of this experience, would look to shift there because I think that WebEx still provides a more secure platform. And as I said earlier, other platforms are likely to develop in that space. So once we had our platforms selected through those 3 phases of audit, we needed to work with our organisation to implement those platforms. As I said before, this all happened fairly rapidly, so we're trying to adjust these further over time. To support the implementation of this new technology, we designed a COVID-19 practice framework. So that looked at things like staff self-care, how working from remote environments and using platforms like CoviU aligned with our theory of change. It brought in place key practice recommendations for working in remote settings and using digital platforms. And it also looked at self-care. One of our biggest challenges in this space is ensuring that our colleagues are looking after themselves so that they can effectively support the safety and well-being of our clients. We developed a new COVID-19 safety plan procedure and conducted an audit across all our clients. So in mid-March, we had about 1,400 clients that we contacted directly and reassessed their safety against our new safety plan procedure, and also asked them questions around their ability to connect with us remotely or digitally. We were fortunate in that we were able to use brokerage and donations from local telecommunication companies to mail out devices and data packs to clients who didn't have them, to ensure that we could have business continuity with those services. And all this was built on a literature review that our research and evaluation team had conducted into what effective practice would look like through a pandemic and what key considerations the social services sector would need to make through a pandemic. We implemented these alongside providing licenses for use with all our practitioners, and for some teams we've provided additional training and support in how to use those platforms. There's been many challenges through that process. I certainly think we've done the best we can and have relied fairly heavily on consultation across the sector to ensure that we're making non-biased decisions wherever possible. I think the biggest challenge has been the complexity in choosing platforms to use for remote service delivery, and that remains a challenge, and each platform has its relative pros and cons that we need to review for longer term use. And their security and privacy for clients is our biggest concern. We had to design new informed consent forms and procedures for the use of different platforms. We felt that we couldn't have one informed consent process for one platform when there's different considerations for each. We know that use of digital platforms to engage clients can create complacency in staff. You can see my home in the background behind me, and being a home environment can create a different feel to service delivery. So we wanted to make sure that our practice guidelines accounted for that and at least named it for staff to be aware of. Similarly, we know that our clients engaging with us remotely, be it through mobile phone or through platforms like CoView, are likely to experience increased inhibition in the way they engage with us. They're also in their home environment, they've got their family and possibly friends around them, and that means they can be more inhibited in the way that they engage with us. So we needed all our colleagues to be really aware of the boundaries that needed to additionally be put in place in service delivery within the context of COVID. It's been really hard to monitor the safety and visibility of our clients in that space. Where we are able to use CoView and ask clients to switch on their cameras, and where we are able to engage with children through that platform, we have some enhanced visibility, but it's still not ideal. And much of our casework has felt a little like we're holding rather than doing deep casework with our clients. Of course, as time goes on, that feels like it's shifting a lot. We have weekly practice meetings with all our leadership groups, so all our team leaders and practice leads across our organisation. And it's been a real challenge to shift from holding into deeper casework, but it seems like that's occurring now. As we do so, we encounter new problems. So as new clients come onto the books, engagement through digital platforms is much harder, but case closure is much harder because we have a high degree of anxiety around whether we're closing at a time that supports safety, given the layer of community complexity that COVID provides. There's more technical challenges, so we need to, in onboarding these platforms, need to ensure that staff information isn't visible. So we've asked them not to include first name and surnames in the way that they engage with their clients, and to ensure that there's no identifiable information in their backgrounds. Despite all the challenges, I think we're starting to recognise many of the benefits that present in engaging this way, and I think we'd all in the room today be thinking that hybrid service delivery into the future is a really strong likelihood for our services, that we might be able to look at the increased efficacy of services if we can look at a combination of telehealth enabled services or online platforms with face-to-face service delivery. And we're really excited about the opportunities that presents in service innovation and redesign into the future. But still grapple with the challenges that are presented now. So I might hold there with that kind of general overview and throw across to my colleagues to tell us more about their story, and really looking forward to coming back to a conversation around your broader experiences and any questions you might have about our experience at Family Life. Thanks, Mandy.
Thanks very much, Tom. That was really interesting, actually. So I've taken lots of notes. Now we're going to hand over to Louise, Over to you, Louise.
All right, I'm unmuted now. Thank you. Thanks very much, Mandy. And I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Wurundjeri elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We value the ongoing contribution to the cultural heritage of this land. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very thrilled to be here and to share our experiences, which a lot of experiences are very similar to what Tom has already presented. I'm actually going to share a PowerPoint because I am a speech pathologist by background and I tend to be very wordy. So keeping to a PowerPoint does support me. So I will now share this PowerPoint with you before I start. Oh no, I tried it before, didn't I? Okay, here we go. Mandy, can you confirm that you can see that? Yeah, okay. Just before I start about our specific services that I manage, I want to let you know that I'm a small part of a very big organisation, and we too have a number of other services that are integrated within the organisation. Headspace, mental health services, AOD, we've got dental programs, we've got GP services, we've got all of the allied health services for the aged care sector. We've got CAM Care, which are integrated family services. It's lovely to see David Cook here in the audience as well, who leads our CAM Care service. So my team are relatively small in a bigger picture service, but I'm going to talk about the very hands-on aspects that have affected how my team have gone. So I'll give you a little bit of a history with what's happening. The team that I lead have just been an amalgamation of 4 services since 2015, and it's part of a community health service, but we amalgamated with another community health service in Melbourne, and we provide services to the whole of the inner east. But we also amalgamated with 2 early intervention programs since over a period of time from 2015 to now. And our service with the amalgamation of CAM Care coming on board as well, which as I indicated, David's in the audience, leads. We changed the name in October 2016 to Inner East Community Health. So I lead 4 teams. They've now come together to be merged into one, and the team is made up of a whole gamut of allied health professionals and educators. So that's the list of providers that I manage across 5 different sites within the Inner East. We assess and treat children and families from 0 to 12 years with developmental delays, genetic disorders, specific diagnoses, and within the community health funded cohort, priority for our service are vulnerable and at-risk children, and they are the ones that receive our state funded health services. And they're often the entry point into our NDIS and our early childhood intervention services that we also now offer, having amalgamated 2 of those. We developed a pathway. We're one of the few community health centres in Melbourne that have both community health funded developmental services and ECHA services, early intervention. So we developed a pathway so that families could enter at any point in our service. So from first contact, where they might not have a diagnosis or have any understanding of what their child's needs are, is number 1, right through to receiving early intervention capacity supports. Now, children come in through the community health framework and are assessed, and they might have an initial appointment that then would lead them on a pathway into public community health services or on a pathway to getting early intervention supports. And we support especially the vulnerable families along that NDIS pathway should they need them. So this is a nice little pictorial that we give to families and say, well, you're coming in at 0.4 or you're coming in at 0.2. We'll help you with your need, your specific needs, and then we'll provide you with some support should you need to go down that NDIS pathway. But many of our children will stay in the community health pathway because they won't be eligible for NDIS. But they have lots of other family issues such as family violence, child protection, foster care. They may not need NDIS supports, but they still need community-based programs. And this is our main referral sources, maternal and child health. Most of our referrals are under 3, and they will commence with us at that age and might stay with us to the age of 12, depending on which pathway they come through. GP specialists, hospitals, paediatricians, education providers, and they all, but a majority of our referrals come through the maternal and child health networks. So we provide all of those developmental services for the whole cohort of children in the Inner East. Now, how we have dealt with the pandemic, Tom has outlined the problems associated with finding a platform. We too had those discussions and multiple discussions, but prior to that, we conducted a full risk assessment, and this was across the organisation of all of our areas to see where the risk of clients continuing to be seen face-to-face or with groups. And we determined that in our area that risk was too hard to continue. Therefore, we needed to straight away adopt a telehealth model and not be seeing our clients face-to-face. And that happened was almost like 3 days to a week. So we then needed to make a very big rapid business model change, which was to decide that we would move all face-to-face individual and group programs would be moved to telehealth supports. In doing that, we did, like Tom was explaining, we did an audit of our clients and those that had IT systems to support telehealth and those that didn't, and how we could support them through that process. We needed to find a secure platform, and I won't go through all the detail that Tom did, but we ended up we started thinking about Zoom, but our IT department felt that we needed a platform to support all of the services across our agency, and DHHS had advised that we were already on Microsoft Teams, and we felt that we could use that both in the organisational meetings and business working, but also with our clients. So we, at this stage, are using Microsoft Teams. Some of our AOD services of mental health services are using CoView, like Tom, but most of the organisation on Microsoft Teams. Now that required a lot of guidance notes for clients, a lot of guidance notes for staff. There was a lot of IT resourcing required to support the staff. Most of our staff already had iPads, and most of them were given permission to take screens and computers from home, from work to home, but we also allowed remote into the systems at work. So this was all enabled in very quick time, and I think our IT department were working like 80 to 100 hours a week to get everyone set up very, very quickly. And we needed letters and forms and consent forms, like Tom was saying, consent to be involved in telehealth because it had its own challenges and different consent items that we needed to meet. And we also needed to change our appointment systems and our billing systems because we also had NDIS billing that was affected and other billing processes that we needed to make. So a lot had to happen in a very short time. Fortunately, we had a GM in our organisation who was driving the whole the COVID-19 response in our organisation, and we got some very clear messaging from above, and we had weekly senior management and executive management meetings to assist us with guidance notes and everything that we needed to do. The staff themselves had to make lots of changes, and it was really, really, really rapid changes. They had to develop new resources, online resources, videos, linkages to programs they found, lots and lots of research. We also decided, in addition to therapeutic supports, that we would develop a newsletter, and I'll just show you some of the items that we added to our newsletter to increase our support for vulnerable families and families, all of our clients, not just those that we were engaged in face-to-face, but our whole distribution list of clients, which was about 1,000, we basically sent the newsletter to, and we continue to do that now. We are also in the stage of developing a client portal, which will assist our face-to-face service delivery. So when families are seen in face-to-face, then information can be sent through the portal, but to them to support their continuing of their therapy programs at home. So the client portal is a secure way of having their own little portal where they hold all the information that we send to them. Totally new approaches to therapy and assessment were having to be developed, and we were running virtual play and parenting groups very quickly, because our program has quite a few supported play groups and parent-child mother groups programs. So very rapid changes in business model, similar to what we had to do suddenly for NDIS. It's almost like a total reform of our program delivery, done what I would say would have taken 6 to 12 months in the past was having to be done in a month. And it was a really, really frenetic time for all. So I would just like to say that we did seek the permission of all of our clients to go into telehealth supports, and 90% said yes. They wanted to continue their telehealth, their support via telehealth. So we were really, really, really happy with that. And we actually haven't lost momentum until recently. I think things, because of the easing of restrictions, people are really questioning, do we need to continue telehealth at this point? And some do want to go back face to face. But the main thing for the clinicians, and I will start with the clinicians because there was a lot of work invested in supporting the clinicians, they were very grateful for the strong decision we made to move straight to telehealth. It eliminated the risk, the total elimination of risk for transmission to staff, and they felt that they were able to continue safely that way. So they were very happy about the clear and responsive high-level management that was given. Our IT support was paramount to the success, and that was with respect to getting the platform, with respect to developing instructions and having backup, because as you know, IT systems are not always conducive and they don't always work when you want them to. They're working really well this morning, which is great, but they're not always working for people. So IT support was paramount. The mental health of our staff was also paramount in our minds, and Tom's mentioned this. We had morning team huddles every day to start with, and we've continued those, and they are like a coffee get-together. We talk about, we might have competitions, we might have talk about what happened, your most risky travel plans that you had in the past, or what you're doing on the weekend. We've had baby guessing competitions and things, just to keep people having those sorts of supports. But the organisation as a whole have also offered mindfulness via telehealth and Pilates and all sorts of supports to keep everybody in a space where they feel mentally and physically supported. I would say one of the biggest things that's happened for my team is it's strengthened my whole of team culture and communication. Because we work across 5 sites, bringing the community health and ECHA's team together have been challenging for us, and this has basically cemented that, because they are actually communicating much more than they ever did in the past. So that's been a great thing for us. We've also increased our ability to share resources and knowledge sharing across the sites, and discipline sharing through the merger of files and file systems within the Teams platform. So that's been another great outcome. I hope I'm not going over time. So for the families, the biggest things for them, they were also very grateful that we totally eliminated the risk for them at that early stage in March, and because they were in transition as to, oh, will we, won't we come in, or won't we in our groups, we're really dropping down in numbers. So they were actually grateful that we made a strong decision about we will go telehealth and nothing else at this point. It's been really interesting. We've had more compliments received through telehealth than we had prior to when we were doing face-to-face supports. And I think it's because they've all felt supported, but also because the move away from clients actually being, or children actually being serviced one-on-one, we've gone more to a coaching model with the parents, so they feel more empowered, and it's improving engagement. We've also focused more on what we call routine-based assessment, so assessing how they're coping with their daily activities and their routines, and you know, what that means for them, what stresses them out the most at home with regard to their child's disabilities. And we've been working on more routine than specific clinical-based assessments, because one of the barriers to telehealth is doing formal clinical-based assessments for some of the children we see. It's allowed more accessibility and flexibility for families, because we can fit better with their appointment times to suit their family. Some of the geographical barriers have been reduced by removing travel from the mix, and enabling that. And we've been able to be a little bit more visible for those families most in need, because more frequency has been enabled by telehealth, because we have been able to schedule more frequent, shorter appointments this way, not having to account for travel, etc. And as I said, we developed a newsletter, which these are the front pages of the newsletter, which we had topics within our newsletter about talking to children about coronavirus, low-cost activities in the holidays, connecting with libraries, parent self-care, routines, you know, how they deal with routines, happy meal times. So we had our clinicians feed into all of the ideas that our newsletter did, and we've had lots of great feedback from clients about the newsletters that we've been sending out monthly. Something that has been on our agenda for a long time and has not been enabled till now, so it's been great. So just quickly, the main challenges have been the speed of change for all. It's just been so rapid, and we really have been amazed at what the clinicians have done. The IT has obviously been a big challenge for clinicians and clients, and especially our most vulnerable clients. We've assisted them to get IT support, and NDIS offered that support, but still it hasn't been quick and forthcoming for some families. And we found that our most vulnerable families still do find telehealth very challenging, and we have had to increase some of our welfare checks because of family violence and safety. And as you know, that's in the media quite a lot, and David Cook would be able to be testament to talking about that from the Integrated Family Services aspect. Some clinical presentations are not suited to telehealth. There's no doubt we could not do formal autism assessments. We can't do formal cognitive assessments through telehealth. And so we moved away from those, and we will have to redo those. They do require face-to-face and sitting next to the child and delivering. So some formal assessments have been difficult. We have had a little bit of disengagement, but we've been surprised. We haven't had a lot. And some families have indicated a preference for face-to-face. But we feel a mixed model will be the way we will go forward because of all the positives that have come out of this. Clinicians have reported increased time taken to prepare and conduct sessions, but that's because they've had to source new ways of doing things. And I think that would ultimately improve over time. And just the intensity of providing telehealth sessions all day, you know what it's like being on meetings all day through telehealth. The intensity for clinicians has been really, really high, and that does create more anxiety, and it does affect the mental health of clinicians and families. And they've been juggling their own family needs, homeschooling, juggling client need, families juggling homeschooling, as well as juggling their therapeutic supports as well. So lots of challenges, but lots of good. So what are our plans? We're slowly transitioning back, but we're not going to return to the old model. We're actually proposing an evaluation of our telehealth to inform future service model internally and for the sector. And we're looking at some grant support for that. and we anticipate a mixed model. And the questions we're going to ask are around the effectiveness and the journey for families. So which clients it's been great for, when in the journey it's been the best. We think that's after they've already engaged with the clinician face-to-face. It seems to be much better for them. What types of presentations, telehealth supports, what age groups, how was the experience for both family and clinicians? So we're developing questionnaires to assess the journey and experience from all of our clients, which we're starting right now, and then we're going to continue. We do believe we will continue with the team huddles. We think they've been so supportive of communication and information sharing, and as I said, that cohesiveness of our team chats and our videos, and we believe our travel will be reduced in the long term as well. And we may even close one site because we think we might be able to have a mixed model, which is economy of scale will be fantastic for us. So I'm very excited about the possibilities. I think they're endless, and I think this has really thrown up a challenge for all of us to think in new ways. So thanks again for having me, and I welcome any questions, but I'm very excited about the future and what it holds for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise, for that. That was really interesting. And I've already written down to both Tom and Louise a number of questions I'd like to ask, but hopefully people will get in ahead of me. Toni, welcome, Toni. Toni is the Manager of Family and Community Services at BCYF. Love to hear what you've got to say, Toni, too.
Yeah, thank you. And I also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, who are the Wathaurong people from where the land I'm on. And I want to pay my respect to the elders and on the custodian of the lands that you are on this virtual platform on. So thank you so much for inviting me, and it's been great listening to Tom and Louise, and there certainly is an advantage of going last because I'll be able to continue on that conversation. So for BCYF, we're a fairly large organisation within Geelong. I'm one of 7 managers who manage the various platforms of BCYF that vary from early years with kinders, ECI, out-of-home care, youth services, headspace, mental health and other drugs, and myself, family and community services. So my platform is a range of services for families within the community. We get our referrals from the Orange Door and Child Protection, and it really is that early help to reunification and everything that comes in between that. So for me, as one of those 7 managers, I can remember the day was the 18th of March, which was the real tipping point for us. So prior to that, the week before, we had made the decision to split our teams. So all the managers were working at sending half their teams home to work from home and then keeping half in the office. And then they were going to do a swap after a week. But then the 18th of March is when we really just sat down, and we were so fortunate to be supported by our exec and say, we have to jump in. We have to jump in feet first. And I can remember my exec standing at my door going, are we doing the right thing? It's like, yep, let's just do the right thing. So everybody was sent home that week. And so fairly quickly for Bowen Child, Youth and Family, we moved to a virtual world within a week. We had all our practitioners at home. The managers were working really closely with those practitioners to make sure that they were comfortable at home. The agency had made the decision to allow equipment to be distributed out to practitioners' homes as well. So I'm standing here with my stand-up desk that was delivered to me, which is fabulous. So many people who had some modifications within the office environment, that was given to them in their home environment. The IT, like Tom and Louise have spoken about, were incredibly responsive. We ensured that we provided our practitioners with everything they needed. The platform, again, was a big discussion. What were we going to use? And we too landed on Zoom. And once we'd made that decision, then our IT department really supported us in providing some really clear guidance out to the practitioners to be able to use Zoom and use Zoom within the constraints of privacy and making sure that we were doing the right thing and we were able to lock meetings and really start learning around what Zoom can do. That being said, we've not restricted using any other type of platform that we're invited into because we had to be able to give flexibility. because like Tom said, we were just doing what we could in that time. And we didn't want to stop that communication from happening. So the staff are using multiple platforms, but for BCYF, we have chosen that Zoom is the platform to go for. So once we'd made that decision, the managers then worked really hard at making sure 3 things: understanding the clients and understanding the risks for those clients and who did we need to action first, understanding our limitations. So what's the platform we're going to use, what's the privacy, what's the guidelines, what's the advice from the Department of Health, what's the advice from the DHHS or from federal funding bodies, and also understanding what we were able to provide. So once we knew what the limitations were, what we were able to provide. And so that turned into a flurry of activity for each of the managers to really design something, to go into a design piece with their leadership teams around providing a response, because the one thing that everybody was consistently saying is that we have to be able to respond to the community, because yes, we're all in chaos, but they're equally in chaos. So what does that response look like? So that we were able to then give that response to the practitioners so that they felt confidence within that response that they were delivering out to the community, because they were the ones that were having that face-to-face connection with the clients. So prior to doing this presentation, I actually sent the questions around to each of the managers, and they provided the response back into me. And it was really good for me to be able to map out, because you can actually see that we've all collectively done the same thing. So that just shows from an agency perspective, the agency really took hold of that umbrella view and was able to provide some clear guidance down to us as managers who are doing that design around the expectation of the agency that we had to be able to deliver. So from a real operational viewpoint, what happened really quickly is that hybrid model and that virtual world. So what we didn't want to do, we had many different pathways for each of those platforms coming into the agency. We had a couple of programs, my program, Family and Community Services and Youth Services, which had that brokerage and that ability to change that brokerage to an emergency response and to provide material aid. What we didn't want to do is say to our colleagues in the other platforms, now you have to go through the orange door, which is the platform for a referral pathway to us, just to get access to that material aid. So we used our partnership with the department. We were able to make sure that we were able to deliver that material response to any family that was accessing support from Bowen Child, Youth and Family, regardless of what service that they were receiving. So we just removed the whole funding barriers that often will come in before us when we've got service delivery. So regardless of which platform or which support those families were sitting at, they were all able to receive this emergency material response. One of the quick decisions that we made was providing our families with the technology. So we wanted to be able to maintain that virtual contact and that connection with the families that we had. So we did go out and we did purchase a lot of mobile technology to be able to provide to families. So that, and again, that wasn't just families from one program, that was families from across the whole agency, because it was exactly the same, regardless of where they were sitting, the issues that they were facing was exactly the same. Myself from Family and Community Services, Out of Home Care and Youth Services made the decision really early to develop a mobile response. We knew we still had to do face-to-face contact, but we also had to do it in a way that was guided by the department with the restricted outreach, the 15 minutes, doing all the pre-screens. So the three managers of that program developed the mobile response and also put some tight constraints around that. So for myself, what we did was we had our screening assessments when a one-on-one, a face-to-face visit was requested. It was in response to a natural risk. So we wanted to make sure that we had sight of children, and we also started to see with some women who are affected by family violence, we started to see a shift in some of their behaviours, so, and their communication back to us. So we were just a little concerned around, okay, so what aren't you telling us? And that was a trigger for us to be able to authorise a face-to-face. That restricted outreach was a moment of new skill development. So it was working with families, really saying to them, I'm coming to the door and you have to present your child to me because we've got concerns around this. So it really went back to our practice. When we pick up families within family and community services, we have a very open conversation around what our role is, and we're a child safe agency, and if there's any risks to the children, then this is what we're going to do. Very, very open around that. So thankfully, the practitioners who are doing that sighting up the children were able to use some of those skills to be able to have very clear and transparent conversations with families. It worked well. We were able to cite a lot of children, and we were able to complete many of those face-to-face. But again, it's still restricted, it's still on the doorstep, it's not what we would normally do or what we'd like to keep in place. But we're guided by the framework that we were given by the department. So the other two mobile response worked in exactly the same way. So they did that pre-screening with the families, made sure it answered the COVID screening, answered the PPE screening questions that came from the department, and then made an informed decision around that practitioner actually completing the one-to-one face visit. So that probably took a good week for us to really pull together what does each of the services deliver and what are the constraints within that service, and then providing that to the practitioners to socialise it with them, to be able to understand it and to have some confidence within that. From a staff perspective, we had some staff members who didn't want to do the mobile response, and that was fine. That wasn't challenged. We understood that this is a very personal journey for staff, that they've got concerns themselves. So if they didn't want to be placed onto that mobile response, then that was totally fine. It was not expected. The practitioners who were on the mobile response from my team actually really enjoyed that shift and that change and be able to have that contact with clients. But it wasn't just their own, so they were doing it for the whole of the platform. The material response was delivered through that mobile response as well. So whoever was on the mobile response was actually dropping off food vouchers, the phones, the data that was required. So across each of the platforms, another key element that worked all the way through was that we really connected with partners, and we made sure that those conversations with partners were happening weekly, sometimes daily, to make sure that we were actually not going too far down a rabbit hole for the first instance, but also we were actually strengthening the response that was being delivered to the family. What we didn't want to do is we didn't want to start delivering a service and then have to pull it back. We would rather have developed our service and our service delivery to meet what was required and what we were able to deliver. So our partners across the board, Child Protection, the Alliance, so the Family Services Alliance, and Bowen Health, we were in close contact with them. We were also an ECI provider, so the ECI team had really close contact with the National Disability Insurance Agency, and they were able to adapt to the requirements that they were requesting, and actually then moving into a home environment was a lot easier for them because they had all the systems in place that's provided to them by the agency. But saying that, they also did some really great innovation work as well. They identified children that they believed could potentially be at risk, and then married that up with the information that they were getting from NDIA, and then also tapping into what family and community services were able to deliver from that mobile response. So what the early years program were able to do is make contact with families, and if they needed some of that additional support, then they would connect them with family and community services, and we would provide them a brief intervention to prevent them coming through to the orange door What we didn't want to do is we didn't want to overwhelm a system, because we didn't know how overwhelmed that system was going to get. So we were listening to everything that was happening across the world. There was really clear evidence that there was a stagnant level of referrals, and then there was a big avalanche of referrals coming through. So we didn't want to push families into that system when they didn't need to be in that system if they just required material response from us. So another theme from across the platform is that, oh, I'm getting the wrap up, but the other thing that is was key throughout all those platforms is the use of the care team. So being able to be in that professional setting was amazing from a technology perspective, because everybody was together, they were all talking, they had the time because there was none of that travel, but they were also able to ask those questions around who's actually seen the children. So we weren't sitting in a space where we were assuming somebody else had seen the children. So we asked the question straight away, and each week from a practitioner level, there was a checkpoint, who's actually seen the children in that family each of the week. I will stop talking because I'll happily respond to any of the questions. But yeah, I'm incredibly proud of the agency, but I'm also incredibly proud of the agencies across the state. As I'm hearing more of these stories, I think we've done an amazing job. And like Louise said, we won't be returning back to how we used to do things, because we can do things differently.
Thank you so much, Toni. That was really interesting. Look, before we go into questions, we thought we would probably be handy to have a bit of a 5-minute break. But before we do, we were hoping you guys might be willing to fill out a little poll just to get a bit of a reading on where people are sitting in relation to using remote delivery and degree of confidence. So Ella will just put that up. It's really simple. If you could fill it out, and then if we have 5 minutes, and we'll come back, say, at 11:10.
Perfect. Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm just sharing the results of this poll from everybody now. Thanks so much for responding. Really interesting.
Yeah, really. Yes, it is really interesting. There's quite a high degree of confidence, really, which is, I mean, isn't that amazing adaptability of the sector? Given this has been a very quick thing that has happened, really. Okay, we've got 10 past 11 now. Yeah, that was just a really interesting litmus test of where, as a group, we sort of are. It's quite astounding, actually. I thought that there'd be a little bit more of uncertainty, which I just think that's wonderful. Maybe that's me reflecting on my own technological challenges. But I'm getting there too. It's a really great opportunity. Now we
I think part of it is that people have just had to adapt, and they've had to. It's almost been, you have to just delve in and do it. Like, you know, it wasn't a choice. It was almost like we all had to go down this path, and therefore you had to build your confidence over time. So, and we've had a fair bit of time because it sort of happened very quickly. So it's a couple of months now. But, you know, it's like get in there and do it, isn't it?
It was a very forgiving environment as well, though, to be able to do it, because everybody knew we were just trying.
Yeah.
And certainly from people that I've had a conversation with, they've made mistakes. That's okay. You know, we were just trying to do what we tried to do in that moment in time. And because people are not being critical of those decisions because of the overlay of COVID, then I think it makes people a lot more confident to be innovative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I do agree as well, in terms of people's willingness to try new things, because there's not the same degree of expectation about being an expert in it.
Yeah, because nobody's an expert in a pandemic.
It's sort of liberating.
It leveled the playing field.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, if anyone has any questions, if you can either unmute yourself and address them to or comments, or alternatively write them in the comment section, in the chat section of the screen. That would be handy. We have had one from Dakina Mitra. She says, I was listening to the webinar yesterday. They said clients are net savvy. They are using multiple applications to create and view content. Hence, it has been great for them to get on board with this work too.
Yeah.
Is that reflecting? Would you like to comment on how open your clients have been?
Well, for us, with the services platform, and we have a number of young and Headspace, but we had that adolescent young person client cohort. This is their language, this is their world, and we were just invited into that and were able to come into it. So the youth services were amazing at pulling together the ability to be able to chat to the young people on Messenger. So of course that comes with lots of different responsibilities. So the agency put some safety measures in around that, and some really strict guidance to staff. But the fact that the staff are communicating with young people within their language, within their platform, the engagement increased significantly, and they were more open. They were more open to that conversation.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's been a great engage with clients in a platform that they have more autonomy and control over. And I think for many clients, that's also enabled engagement with service where engagement might have been a real challenge. However, I think there's, as with any service model, exceptions. And we found through earlier reporting that many young parents, for example, don't actually have the technical capacity we assume they have to access a range of platforms and even devices. And there's a financial barrier for many people as well in accessing those devices. I was certainly surprised in that earlier report that we'd undertaken with Swinburne that adolescent parents were really struggling to use technology to engage in service delivery. And they referenced a lot around some of the broader systems like MyGov that are really hard to access and use. Yeah. So I think there's a real interesting kind of systemic viewpoint we need to take around if we're putting engaging platforms out there, how do they complement or stand alongside systems like MyGov? Finally, I'd say there's anecdotally many clients where they experience things like an acquired brain injury, and across our systems that could be through, say, previous heavy substance misuse. And for those clients, even following a email link to access a service platform could be a real barrier to engagement. So I think, like any service model, it's created opportunity for engagement for some clients, but that has to be balanced with the barriers to engagement it presents for others.
Yeah. Yeah. Louise, would you have anything on that?
Oh, I'd just like to say that I think we're in an organisation where we're only a very small player, but the areas that it has worked for have been more the young families or the teenagers. We've certainly got a big aged care services in our organisation, and they've really struggled, and for the very reasons that Toni or Tom outlined there. With the younger members, they're used to it, it's their language, they're already on a lot of these platforms, except for, there are families, and when we did an audit like Tom did, that, there were families that we were surprised they had nothing that could support this, and we had to support them through that. But the majority did. So we were very lucky to be able to move to this without, to as much trouble as, say, the adult area. The frail aged, I know my mum, she doesn't even have a mobile phone, so to be able to move to telehealth is a real problem for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andy, I think I'd add an interesting reflection that we've come across where there's so much more choice to engage when you're pursuing through any telehealth platform, be that phone or this kind of format. You can choose not to accept the call. You can choose not to have your screen on. You can choose to mute and unmute yourself. And I think for our sector, that poses really interesting questions around self-determined service provision. But it also poses real challenges where we've got mandated services that need to operate, or where we're providing a voluntary service and we're keen to pursue something like a self-determined service, but at the same time we have a responsibility to assess risk and safety, particularly of children. So again, I think a really interesting reflection for our sector around how to find that balance between enabling and growing client choice in what service delivery looks like, but also meeting our duty of care obligations.
Yeah. Fascinating, really interesting, which is sort of interesting. We've had another question from Laurel Johns. Can anyone speak specifically to working with Aboriginal organisations, ACOs, and or Aboriginal families during this time? Laurel, if you felt you wanted to, certainly unmute yourself. And
so I can't, and I'm not even going to speak on behalf of Wathaurong and the service that they delivered. So Wathaurong is our Aboriginal service here in Geelong, but through the partnership of the Alliance, we were able to support that agency to ensure that families were getting a response. And I know we obviously they come from a workforce with Aboriginal people as well, who has that extra layer of risk that sits there. So one of the alliance agreements was that alliance agencies would pick up families who were okay to be picked up by a non-Aboriginal organisation, and then we would transfer that family back to Wathaurong once Wathaurong were up and running within what their service delivery looks like. And they also provided us through, once that allocation happened and we picked up, we were then able to access them for secondary consultation, making sure we're getting the right advice from that organisation to assist us to deliver a individualised response.
Yeah, thanks, Toni. Yeah, that's Wathaurong is one of the organisations we fund as well. So the area of debt I work in provides funding for parenting support.
Ah, okay.
Meaning, yeah, that's relatively broad, particularly at the moment. We're sort of at the tail end of a reform period. So each of the ACOs is looking slightly different. But I guess we sort of scrambled a bit. When I say we, I mean mostly our regional offices are the ones that specifically manage the service agreements and look after those organizations. But certainly at Central, we're trying to help anyway, or not get in the way. And work out who was doing what and how confidently they were doing it and how consistently they were doing it, whether they were losing contact and or engagement with families and that sort of thing. We just wanted to make sure that even if that was happening for a limited period of time, that they were in a position to make a bounce back, you know, as you've described, Toni, where they were, you know, sort of offloading clients for a certain period of time and then taking, you know, building the caseload back up again.
So they weren't offloading clients. So I was talking about new clients coming through. So I was talking about new families coming through. Certainly there was no sense that Wathaurong weren't delivering services.
They needed that kind of help. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's just, I think we certainly did identify, you know, some technology issues at both ends, both with the practitioners struggling a bit or just not having the equipment. There was quite a range of, you know, everything from, oh, well, you'll just have to make do with your mobile to, you know, issuing everyone with laptops. So it was kind of, there was a real range of organizational responses to that sudden need for equipment. And then certainly we're about to do an online PD next week. I kind of have my fingers crossed on that because there's varying degrees of comfort and familiarity with an online platform like Zoom to do a PD, which we had intended to do face-to-face in March. So we just completely shifted the format. And certainly I've found that our younger practitioners are just sort of on it, you know, no problem. They've just sort of made the transition quite happily and are still working with the same families, and others are really struggling. So not that that's specific to the Aboriginal community, but I think they do face some particular challenges in terms of just access to the ACO. So the ACO is not just a health service, it's not just a place where you access family services. It's a place where the elders come and hang out and have a cuppa, and having to, you know, sort of reduce or completely eliminate those kind of things was really difficult for everybody. So yeah, at the same time when we're going, oh, well, how's service delivery going? They're sort of, well, we've got lots of other things on at the moment as well. So yeah, interesting times.
I wondered in relation to that about rapport and any insights you or anyone in the audience might have about techniques to build rapport online, because of course in this type of mode, a lot of the signals and a lot of the ways in which people build trust and connection are sort of compromised by the technology. And I just wondered if you had any insights about that.
I just think it was, from what I have heard about how the various ACOs have coped, I think it was really all about flexibility and just being innovative and not stopping, just getting out there and trying something. Because these are relationships that, you know, in most cases are quite long established, and you know, the practitioner knows the family and that sort of thing. It's just more a matter of, okay, I can't see you, I can't give you this workbook. All right, well, I'll come by and leave it in the, you know, in the post box. And again, there were some that just jumped straight into that. I think generally the younger practitioners, and others that, you know, 2-3 a month down the track, they were still sort of struggling to try to work out, you know, what to do and how to do it. So flexibility is just the willingness to just, I think Louise referred to that, to just jump in and just try something and go from there.
Can I say with rapport too, I think, you know, the expectations that from my team, the clinicians had initially, we had to dampen their expectations about doing the same things they used to do before. The expectations for families also were going to be very different, and a lot of the initial engagement on telehealth was more about just how you're going, how's it all working for you. It wasn't about jumping into any sort of therapeutic mode or anything like that. So especially if they had no engagement with this client pre-telehealth. So we talked a lot with our clinicians about, don't expect you'll be doing what you did before or doing it in the same way, or and don't set up that expectation with your clients either, because it really is just about supporting them. It's not about being a physiotherapist per se on the screen. It's about supporting and seeing how they're actually doing at this tough time, because they're all doing it tough. And so I think the building rapport came with just being in the same space with them as to where it is. We're all doing it tough, and everybody's having to do things differently, and you might not be able to do what you wanted to do or need to do at this point anyway, because so much else is happening around us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've had similar conversations across our workforce around good enough being good enough at this time. In addition to that, I think we've tried to look at the sharing of psycho-ed materials to build rapport. So there's kind of a unique capability to do that with the share screen function. But some apps, including Covey, have a whiteboarding function, and that's been great to engage children and work with them in that space, because you can draw pictures together as you go about your session. And we found, and the literature kind of backs this up, that inter-session contact has an even higher degree of importance if we're operating this way. So not relying solely on a phone call or a Zoom or Covey or whatever session, but following that up with text messages or emails in between sessions to build rapport, and probably a greater weighting on that inter-session contact than the normal service delivery, where you can rely on your face-to-face service to build that rapport.
Yeah, it's similar. The resources that have been made available to the sector has been phenomenal. They came out very quickly. So from an agency, we made sure that they were shared across all practitioners in one place, so that we're able to enhance our practice. And obviously, at first, it was all around information around COVID, how to talk to your children around COVID. So it wasn't necessarily focused on the goals that we were working on. It was around, okay, how can we make you feel as safe as possible within this current environment? So rapport for existing clients was easy because that had already been developed. But now we have accepted a large number of new referrals coming through. So it's just providing the practitioners with that confidence to be able to have those conversations straight away and make them trusting. We did invest in a lot of Berry Street training as well, the single session training, which helped.
We have a number of comments about the change. The social connection is changing as a new norm, and then the nature of that relationship, which is what you're sort of talking about in some ways. And I had assumed, I suppose, that it's difficult to connect across this type of system. But in actual fact, you're suggesting that perhaps the way in which that is required to sort of transpire in an ongoing, iterative way might strengthen that bond and the productivity of that relationship. Would that match what you're sort of talking about?
Yeah, I think if moving on, this type of delivery will certainly be offered to families who feel comfortable enough to have it and want it. I think we've seen families really respond well. They don't feel disadvantaged that it's all virtual, they actually feel empowered.
Yeah. One of the other things that has come up in other conversations I've had is about the evidence that sits behind this. And Tom, you mentioned a literature review you did, and so I was really interested in finding out how you might be approaching building your evidence about what you're doing, or whether you're drawing from others, and what you might recommend as good sources or good tactics around this, if you have any insight about that.
We've all been kind of thrown into a world where we have to think about outcomes reporting at this time. So we're planning to report 3/4 of outcomes reporting in the business as usual landscape, and then 1/4 of COVID performance and impact for this financial year. And obviously this is something for organisations to consider going forward, because there's going to be a hefty impact on the new financial year as well. We've redesigned our primary, what we call our Tier 1 outcome measurement tool, which combines client satisfaction with a few key indicators that are mapped back to our theory of change. And we've built in some COVID-19 specific questions to that tool so that we can ask clients what their experience is like and how that's impacting, in particular, on safety and wellbeing. So it'll be interesting to see what data that presents. Alongside that, we've got safety planning data for every client that's reviewed weekly or fortnightly, and that changes growth or de-escalation in risk over time. So we're able to track and monitor that. But I think that working towards some sort of qualitative data collection around the narrative experience our community's having is going to be a really necessary next step.
Connection. Is there any other additions to what anyone in the audience is doing around this space? What ways in which are you collecting information from clients? Maybe it hasn't come up quite yet, because I imagine you're still in the manic adaptation mode. Look, I've just noticed the time. It's 11:32. Unless there's any last comments, because I imagine people are hard pressed for time. All nodding. I can't really see any nods, but I'm imagining. Look, I just also wanted to say, here at Open, we've also been trying to grapple with this a little bit, and we'd really like to produce something which profiles a range of organisations' responses and tips and strategies. And I was wondering if anyone in the audience would be willing to volunteer to do sort of a small interview, and then we Open could collate this as a bit of a resource for the sector. You of course know our details, but you can always put your email into chat just before you sign off, and we'll contact you about that. It was just something trying to think, how can we build on this conversation and really profile some of the great learnings and opportunities and strategies people are using. Another thing around the evidence is Open runs an advisory service, and we're available to help on a one-on-one basis, one-off, or in a more ongoing way to try and support any efforts you might want to make in relation to capturing data or information about how this delivery model is going relative, and the pros and cons, and what are the opportunities going forward. So feel free to contact us about that. It is open to the sector. It's very low cost, if there's any cost at all, because we're doing a whole heap of training, a whole heap of resource building and so forth. So I just really wanted to say that. We've had a few other options. I think what we'll do, Oh, wonderful. We've got some wonderful invitations to work on pulling a piece together and some requests about sharing information. Why don't I will liaise with our speakers and perhaps get back to you about that, because I'll save this and I'll respond just so that everyone gets onto the rest of their day fairly quickly. I did just want to say one more time, thank you so much, Tom, Toni and Louise. You all spoke just so well and interestingly, and thank you for your generosity. And I'm really hoping that we can create more opportunities where people from across the sector share their own insights and their own world with the rest of us, because it is such a wonderful learning opportunity. Thanks very much. Everyone's saying thank you. Lots of pleasure about what you've said. So we'll sign off now. And hopefully we'll see you at the next open forum, which will probably be online again in a month to 2 months. Thank you very much. Bye.